So my name is Kabage Karanja, co-founder, the director of CAPE Bureau, based in Nairobi, Kenya.
And I'm Kathryn Yusoff, and I'm a professor of Inhuman Geography at the University of London, and we make up the UK Kenya team for the curators of Britannic. So we wanted to take this site that's obviously representative of the UK and think about the collaboration both within the buildings and the kind of wider geographies of colonialism and now kind of climate change. So our idea was to turn the pavilion inside out so that people get to see a different version of the kind of reality of the sort of British geographies in a sense, and their kind of interwovenness in terms of colonial mark of the with the places. But yes, we wanted to change people's vision of the pavilion itself, and then taking through these stories of kind of questions of geology, questions of the earth, and how we think about architecture as an earth practice.
Yeah, just to add on to that, the title of the curation of the British Pavilion is GBR, Geology of Britannic Repair. And tying on to what Kathryn has said, we are looking at the geological context of ecological degradation, colonial extraction, but thinking about repair, thinking about ways and needs we can actually shift the dynamic, shift the discourse towards a more collaborative focus to rebuild and refocus. And it's through something we're calling earth practices. So looking at architecture as an earth practice, literally as a material practice that can actually transcend all of the challenges in many respects through bringing us to get back into the sort of earth system, which we've ignored for centuries. So in a way, it's telling that story of extraction, subjugation, and colonial and imperial practices around the world, but bringing us all back because we are one human species. And we really need this moment in time to be a point when we all come together to reevaluate where we are and actually chance the way forward.
And to build on that, what was the initial question basically that you are trying to respond to?
I think the question came with the building. The pavilion and the British Pavilion in ways is a potent infrastructure of the Giardini complex. We couldn't ignore it because it's this huge neoclassical building that sits at the highest elevation in Venice, and in fact, thinking of that geological as well, makes it be the sort of almost mountaintop of the entire island, ironically, in some way. So we thought to look at the building itself, thinking about its position through satellite analysis. And what we came to realize is the front of the portico faces the UK, literally directly, and the back faces East Africa. So we're almost looking at the central room as a compass to orient everyone as they come in, to look at that positioning and how their individual countries are placed within this sort of carbonated and carbonized world we live in.
Since we are mentioning the exhibitions, can you tell us how did the curatorial process unfold?
Well, we started off with the idea of the building, but also the idea of our collaboration. So not underestimating what it means for a colonized country and those that have been colonized to come together in the same conversation and actually try and sort of work through these narratives, but work through them in a kind of material way. So that was the basis of our coming together, and we also both shared a passionate engagement with geology. From previous collaborations, we're also very interested in thinking about the geologic basis of architecture, but also the imaginaries, that every building is not just a material kind of entity, but it's also an imaginary of the world. And this kind of question of who gets to make and display world pictures.
And were there any particular challenges? Obviously, of course there were, but were there anything specific that's like a turning point in developing the project?
honestly, I think in terms of the relationship between the curators, I think it was like a dream come true. You hear horror stories about curators clashing then to a point. And it's not to say we always agreed, but it was that you actually come together genuinely understanding the gravity of the history, but actually the opportunity of what might be to come. But beyond that, there was the material challenge in terms of the sources of materials that we're bringing into the pavilion. Even within this space, the stripping down of the plaster on the wall, which needed to go through heritage approval. In terms of our participants, the sort of breadth of participants in different parts of the world, still connected to the thing, thinking of how they can come together. That was partly a challenge or a positive challenge, I would say.
And also geography. So we were in different sites, we were in different places. So, yeah.
I want to ask you a more general question. So in your view, what role should the Biennale now and exhibitions like this play in the architectural discourse?
Well, hopefully it will transform it. This is what it will almost become impossible to not think about architecture as a geologic practice, as an earth practice, and then to think about the responsibility of those connections to the earth. So we really wanted to kind of bring people back down to earth, and that's why the pavilion's covered in Kenyan earth, which in and itself is a statement. So, I mean, hopefully people will ask questions, they'll be curious, but they'll also kind of never be able to think about architecture as divorced from the earth.
And what do you hope that people will take with them after visiting this pavilion?
It's hard to say, but I think the hope is to open up a discourse, to do with architecture that's not far removed from not only the earth systems, but the geopolitical realities that we're facing today. We're going through immense crises, not only environmentally, but socially, with what's happening in Palestine, and we have a room dedicated where we have the architects for Gaza, the Palestine regeneration team, thinking about where we are positioned in the world right now. But again, looking at it, yes, in terms of the devastation, but how do we reimagine? And, imagination is a contested point. Who gets the right to imagine? And who gets the right to sort of, be subdued? And I think part of this exhibition is that architecture can open that dialogue fluidly and critically, and that everyone comes on the table, because the built environment is both the site of destruction, but the site of opportunity, where everything grows as a species. We began our habitation within caves, but beyond that, buildings took the next best thing. They took this environment where we paint on the walls, where we'd express who we are, and as a species. So in a way, for us, it's a return to bring the conversations within that space again, to reignite thought processes and ways to move on and move forward as the human species.
And bringing back also the role of architects at the forefront of things, right?
Absolutely. Because, as much as we are not politicians, as much as we're not economists, when the dust settles, this is, I give this hopes and prayers, when the dust settles, there is a huge complement of architects who will come in to repair. But the two are intertwined with both resistance and the right repair and imagination and being able to craft a better future for everyone. Because why are you just broken up, subdivided in this? There's no means.
And finally, can you tell us briefly about everyone who are exhibiting in this pavilion, the curators, everyone who contributed to it?
So there's 6 rooms and a 7th virtual room, which is online simple conversations between the UK and African practitioners, PD floods. In the room just behind you is PART, Palestinian Regeneration Team. There's a collaboration with Philares and Jat Young in the room behind that. And then we have Tandy Lowson looking at Patrice Lamban's grave, and they're mailing Loco and Gustavo. So there's Our collaboration has expanded out into many collaborations, and there's also smaller collaborations at the Inhuman. So it's kind of it's an expanding conversation.
Thank you very much.